Starting with a 9-inch section of 3/4 inch rod, which will make up my handle. I'm just going to grind the rough edges off the end so it doesn't cut through any of the paracord. So now I'm preparing the core strand for shot weighting. This is a 4-foot section of 160 paracord, and I've already gutted it, and I tied a knot in the middle because that's about where I want the shot weighting to end. And now I'm just going to fuse this end, sort of flare it out and fuse it, because that'll make it easier to pour the BBs in. So you can see now I've got this nice open little funnel for the BBs to go into. I'm just going to start loading them. So now the BBs are packed tightly and single file all the way up to the knot. And at this point you can take your handle, spread a dab of epoxy on the end that's going to go into the core. I wouldn't say this is absolutely necessary, but it's a nice bit of insurance. Now this 3/16 inch rod will thread nicely into this end. It only goes in about 1/4 inch, but with the epoxy and the threads, that's enough. So on to the next step. So now I'm going to take the knot out of this end, because that would make a terrible bump later on. And how you hold the shot weighting in place then is fold it over once, wrap a piece of tape around it, then you fold it over again and tape it again. That looks bigger and worse than the knot did before, but later on that'll actually create less of a bump. So at this point, to reinforce the transition here, I like to take a piece of tape and lay it sort of that way. You just wrap it around the transition so it's a little more solid. And you'll want to do that with every bolster you make, so you'll have a really solid transition point by the time you're finished. So at this point, the core should look like this. And what you want to do now is wrap the whole thing with your tape up to about 1/2 foot to the end. So this whole section should still be bare paracord when you're done. So I'm just going to skip ahead and show what that looks like when it's finished. So now I've done 2 layers of tape around this core, one going that direction and one going back. So they're wrapped in opposite directions from each other. It looks a little bumpy now, but this next step will help get rid of those bumps. You need 2 flat surfaces with these 2 boards I've got. You just put the core in there, just roll it out. Go all the way up the width. So now that's done. The core is nice and round all over. It's starting to feel like a whip. The transition's nice and strong. It flicks like a whip. So now you can move on to the first plaited belly. So next is the first plaited belly. I've got two gutted 7-foot strands of 550 cord. And how you start this is take the first strand in the middle, lay it over your handle, wrap it around, make sure it's not twisting or kinking anywhere. Then you take the second strand and put it in under there and pull it through till you get to the middle. And then you can start a 4-plait. I'm not really going to describe all the steps here because there's plenty of videos on YouTube already that describe how to do this better than I ever could. Just know that the first belly on this whip is going to be 4-plait. Okay, I've got this plaited about as far as I want to go. So I'll just tape this down here. Now I'm going to cut all these strands to different lengths so they'll taper nicely and tape them down. So now I'm going to put some more tape across the transition here like I did before. Might take 2 strands this time. Got a nice strong transition, and then I'm just going to wrap the whole thing in tape again. So I just went a little bit past the point where I taped up those strands, the loose ends with the tape, and now I'm going to start taping it down in the opposite direction. So more rolling and more flattening. And that's the first belly done. Nice and round and flat. Transition's getting stronger. And now on to the next belly. So this next layer is going to be 8 plat. I'm using 2 10-foot strands, 1 7-foot strand, and 1 3.5-foot strand. Again, I'm not going to go over all the intricacies of plaiting because there's better tutorials on YouTube than I could make on how to do this. More or less making this video just to show the kind of stuff that goes into making a bullwhip. Also note when you're doing this, with all these strings moving around, it's a good idea not to have cats all over the place. Plaiting's done, so I'm just going to do more taping, more flattening, and then the overlay. So, final step for plaiting anyway. Got a 12-plate overlay started. I'm just going to skip ahead to when that's finished, and you'll see what it looks like. So after a little over an hour, the overlay is done. And I've got a couple inches left of the core strand, and I'm just going to start attaching my fall, which is basically a short section of paracord with a 2/2 hitch tied in the end. So I cut the tag ends, so there's just a few more inches left on them, which will be enough to tie the fall hitch. And you start that by taking the fall, putting all the tag ends and the core strand through the two half hitch. And tighten that. And as for the fall hitch itself, start that by taking one strand, wrapping it around, and then you do sort of an overhand knot on the end of it. Pull it really tight. Then you take the next strand and bring it back around and do the same thing, going over the old tag end, and tighten that, and you do it with the rest of your strands. I'm just going to turn off the camera and finish this and then show you how to, or at least how I finish the fall hitch. Okay, so I did that overhand knot with all the tag ends. Now I'm going to take the last tag end here, which I've already tied the overhand knot with, and put it through the knot made by the first tag end. Let me loosen that up. And then you can, with a pair of pliers, pull the rest of these tag ends and the fall just like that. That'll make it really tight. This won't come apart unless you want it to. So that's the fall hitch. I'm just going to trim these loose ends, maybe whip them together, and then I'll make the cracker. So the fall's attached, the tag ends are all nice and neat. Now I'm just going to make a cracker for it and do some test cracks. So for the cracker, I like to take a strand of the one of the inner strands, about yay long. Put your foot on one end, start twisting the other. Keep twisting it like that until you can feel a good amount of tension, and then you can fold it in half and it'll start to twist up on itself. You just straighten this out and get a good straight cracker. You'll end up with that. Then you can tie a knot in one end, an overhand knot. And that's basically a cracker. Just cut it to length once it's on the whip. So to attach the cracker to the fall, you'll have to fuse the end of the fall, which will give you this sort of hard plastic ball at the end. Then you take the folded end of the cracker, make a loop in it, and put the hard plastic end of the fall through that loop. Then you bring the cracker all the way around the fall and tie an overhand knot in it. And pull it tight. And that'll stay on. Then you just cut it to length and give it a little tassel at the end. And that's how it looks when it's done. So this is done now. I did a final overlay with the hockey tape, which is just something I've been doing with my whips. Cut off the excess on the end, infused all that. It's nice and tidy, and here's how it cracks.